This is a project in collaboration with the John Michael Kohler Art Center and Green Bicycle Company. So a quick agenda here. We'll do introductions. This should only take a couple of minutes. We'll talk about cultural asset mapping on a more general level. We'll talk about cultural asset mapping specific to Sheboygan and our project here. Then we'll talk about the focus areas that we've derived from our work so far. And then we'll have our breakout sessions, which is what I called the meaty part before. That's going to be the really interesting part that we're going to really value your feedback on. Then after we're finished with that, that'll be about 30 minutes. We'll have a report back in closing, and that'll only be a few minutes long. So first, let's talk about Green Bicycle Company. So we are the consultant that's engaged with the John Michael Kohler Art Center to complete this project. Green Bicycle Company is a young firm, but here in Sheboygan, we're rehabbing a building right on A Street, the old Susha News building. That'll be our home, our headquarters. So we were founded in 2020. We'll offer goods, projects, which this is, and then experiences for the community. The common thread there will be sustainability and community building. Here is the small but mighty Green Bicycle Company team working on this project. Heather Cleveland is the owner and founder of Green Bicycle Company. Heather is an environmental engineer and she has a master's in urban planning. She's also the project manager, so she's handling most of the aspects of this project. We have Lorenzo Backus, who's the community developer here. He just received his master's in sustainable peace building. He's really a systems thinker and he's a skilled connector. So we're lucky to have him in this project. And I'm Nancy Mehring. I'm the newest member of the Green Bicycle Company firm. I have a master's in urban planning and I worked in municipal planning for about 7 years. And then I joined Heather's team. So for this experience today, we have Heather, myself, Mary Berkey, Ann Brusky, Ellie, and Melissa, and we'll all introduce ourselves, so I won't spend too much time here. If we'd like to start going around just so we know who's on the call with us, if we all just want to say our name and any affiliations, you don't have to go in depth, something simple. Ellie?
Hi, I'm Ellie Macias. I am the Community Arts Program Assistant. I am running kind of the Zoom background stuff, so bear with me tonight.
Whoever else, just jump in.
I'll jump in. I am Mary Berkey, and I also work in community arts at the John Michael Kohler Art Center with Ellie.
Hi, I'm Ann Brusky with the John Michael Kohler Arts Center, so I work with Ellie and Mary as well.
Hi, I'm Melissa Prentice. I'm the Public Services Manager at Mead Public Library, and we're all about engaging with the community, and so this seems like a really exciting project to be a part of.
All right, it looks like we have Heather, you want to go ahead?
Yep, my name's Heather Cleveland, and I'm with Green Bicycle Company and a big part of this project that we'll be discussing today.
Hi, I was muted just now. Sorry, I was blah, blah, nothing coming out. I'm Alex Leosatos. I work at Lakeland University as the Director of Counseling Services, and I'm also the current president of the Hmong Mutual Assistance Association. So for the next year. So I'm here because I'm very interested in the culture of Sheboygan and what the Hmong Americans can bring to the project, and also maybe any connection with Lakeland University as well. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's Christina Singh and I am the CEO of our Boys and Girls Clubs here in Sheboygan.
And I am Vanessa. I am the Volunteer and Community Engagement Coordinator for Safe Harbor of Sheboygan County.
Great, I think that's everybody that's on the list, so we can move on. Thank you all for being here. This is going to be good. So let's talk more specifically about cultural asset mapping. Cultural asset mapping at its most basic level provides an inventory of key cultural resources that can be utilized in the development effort. A more comprehensive cultural asset mapping initiative can provide a deep understanding of the key networks and cultural attitudes that shape the community and indicate gaps that require further investment. So when we talk about assets for our community, assets can be tangible, and these are things you can touch and hold, and buildings, landscapes, schools, businesses, art, that sort of thing. Those are tangible assets. We also have intangible assets. These are things you can't touch, but they're important to this process. Knowledge, relationships, connections, education. Those things are harder to map, certainly, but so important. So let's talk more specifically about our approach, and I will hand it off to Heather, who can talk more specifically about this project.
Yes, so to begin the project, we looked at some case studies of other cultural asset mapping projects from the United States. We also looked at some in Canada, but this one specifically helped inform our process. We thought it was the design of the process was important. And what we gathered from this one in Gresham, Oregon was cautious with their planning and steps. So we did that. We did some beta testing of the survey process that we did. Also, open-ended questions was very important to us. What we observed in some of the other, and their observations of their own work, is sometimes when you have too many categories, you're making assumptions on people's answers. So we intentionally, although it makes it a bit more difficult on the back end to assess the data that we're collecting, we thought that was important. And then finally, the report design itself, in this example, was a resource. So we are doing that, in fact, as even this process, an example of community engagement, is something that we are practicing and building, and we will share our process in the report. So here are the components that are part of our process. It included one-on-one interviews. And I'll just note that, yes, this has been an interesting process during COVID times. We started the project in September, and then we built our process, did our initial research of community reports that have already been done, looked at those and thought, okay, what can we add to these community reports that have been done by nonprofits or municipalities in our community? How can we add to that? But I will say often this is done in person with group meetings and things like that. So thank you for joining us today, and anyone who's been part of our one-on-one interviews, we really appreciate that. So interviews, one-on-one interviews, surveys, we've conducted surveys with throughout the community and with high schools, opportunities for that. We've done an interactive exhibit at the John Michael Kohler Art Center that was participatory. The important part of that was not only collecting the data from that, but raising awareness about the project was key to that. Presentations, we had a presentation with the John Michael Kohler Art Center community partners who have a wide reach throughout our community. So that has been very valuable. And then also we recently presented to We Rise. And then I will say we've also had 2 other presentations with high school groups, including the Forensics Club and another group at one of the high schools. And then to this part of the process is the community report back. And as Nancy mentioned, not only is it what you're here today and we're having a discussion today and listening and diving deeper, but we also want to share this with other groups. So they will receive this recording and then our discussion facilitation worksheet that we'll be using today, and then hope to get more information and feedback on the direction that we're going with the project. And then finally, prompted by our interviews and surveys, we will be talking to organizations. Part of this is making recommendations for tools and next steps, and we want to make sure that our recommendations are doable and feasible and align with the projects that we would be recommending them to with respect to cultural assets in our community and gaps for that matter. So part of our community conversations is we had 67 interviews and surveys. We collected data such as age, education, race, ethnicity, years in Sheboygan, and career. This was important to us, and this will be part of our final report, but this was important to us to strive to assess a diverse group cross-section throughout our community. So this is just one example of the age breakdown. So 18 years and younger, That was 41% of the people that we spoke with or surveyed. 19 to 39 years old, that was 34%, and then 40 to 73-year-olds, that was 41%. And then the 19 to 39 was 34, and then 18 years and younger. So in our focus questions, these are the themes that we focused on. It was culture, representation, investment, and community. And we had some primer prompts, we like to call them, and then they led us to the deeper prompts. So these are 4 of them, and then we're going to unpack them in the next couple slides. So are various cultures represented in Sheboygan, and how? What are things in our community that are important to your well-being or belonging? What would you like to see in your community with respect to community investment? And what organizations are already working on cultural community investment, and why? So for the first prompt, we received answers such as the ones on the left. So German, Hispanic, Hmong, African American. So people felt that these cultures are represented, and that they're represented in the following ways. So food, social organizations, cultural celebrations, art, education, sports, church, and school. But this was an answer if we could, if we had a yes, no, the majority of what we received was yes, but. And the but was, they're represented in these ways, but not represented in other ways. Or people have to get out and interact more was a recommendation, or they're represented minimally. There's a strong reference to white Germanic conservative culture, and there is so much diverse culture as an undercurrent. That word undercurrent maybe wasn't used in exactly, but that was a common response. It's here, but people don't know it. There are events that promote sharing of the culture, but those events are far and few between, not on a regular basis and ongoing, spotty. And then positions of leadership, most likely not represented very well. The boards that this particular interviewee serves on are fairly white. So in another question, what are things in our community that are important to your well-being or belonging? And these are the tangible, and Nancy had mentioned earlier, tangible versus intangible. So these were some of the tangible answers. And then these were some of the intangible answers. And these are the ones that we're diving a bit deeper into today and with our project. So feeling like I belong to something bigger than myself, ability to get involved, education, not only academics, safety and economics, education for my kids, especially when they were younger, acceptance, and again, safety, community involvement, and awareness. You can kind of see a couple of these. Participation and engagement, we called that a theme in several of these answers. And then what would you like to see in your community with respect to community investment? So we had a wide spectrum of answers that we're continuing to process, and we're working towards categorizing them, and then you'll see several of those categories today that we're going to dive deeper into. And then what organizations and programs are already working on cultural community investment, and why? So these were the organizations that were listed more than once. At least 3 times they were mentioned. Some were mentioned at least 17 times. So these are the folks that we feel are already doing this type of work. So in the questions that we'll be diving deeper into today, we will be following up with these organizations to present the information and make the recommendations, and like I said, ensure that the tools and that we provide are doable, and also help make connections between these if that's the case. So let's dive deeper. So the next 3 are the topics. So your feedback on them will help us move forward. So these are our focus areas based on the surveys and interviews that we conducted. So youth education, engagement and participation, and diverse representation. So these are intangible, but important. And we also found that in sussing out the data and finding these patterns, we think that they're related. So in looking towards diverse representation, if it starts early, it will be easier to have diverse representation, and you'll see in some of our prompts. So youth education. So recommendations are beyond extracurricular activities and keeping youth entertained. rather giving them voice and empowering them to follow what they are passionate about. So here are some examples of some prompts. So what would your community look like if we had youth engagement? And then here are some other ones. Why aren't the youth already engaged? Why is this important and hard? And I will emphasize that if this were easy, it would already be done. This is hard. What can we do better? What can we do better to engage the youth? And what decision-making should the youth be involved in our community? Engagement and participation. The focus is to have deliberate design and intention when implementing and carrying out programs and initiatives. As a community, we want to see more participation from all demographics and backgrounds. So what would our community look like with effective engagement and participation? Why isn't everybody engaged? Do opportunities exist and are they accessible? And how does trust play a role in this? And why, again, why is this important and hard? And then finally, diverse representation. Our leadership should be a representation of our communities. The community input has emphasized a need for diverse representation in all levels of leadership and decision-making. This is an essential part to having an inclusive community. So what would our community look like if we had diverse representation in leadership roles? And then tying back to the other two, like I mentioned earlier, how would diverse representation impact both participation and engagement and the youth in our community? How does power influence representation in our community? How does representation provide a sense of belonging? And finally, whose responsibility is it to determine when representation is sufficient? So with that, we'd like to have a discussion to dive a little bit deeper into each of these topics. This part of the session will not be recorded. And then for those folks who are seeing this as a recorded section, you can hit the pause button and then we can come back to the closing once we are finished discussing. So the next steps in this process, so we're going to be interviewing organizations. We're going to develop recommendations and next steps and define investment ideas. It's always an important part of this. We'll have a final report and presentation in June that will coincide with the summer John Michael Kohler Art Center exhibit that will include the call to artist submissions that's in progress right now. And that's another way to express diversity, to express investment, culture, community as part of our project and representation. The Ray Yoshida project, we didn't touch on that too much today, but we also have 400 plus youth expressing what's important to them in Sheboygan. And then they will also be categorizing it similar to how we're categorizing the interview data. So Ray Yoshida is an artist, was an artist in resident. He was a built environment artist that is featured at the Art Preserve. And so in honor of him, that artwork will be organized and categorized and will be representing the youth. So like I said, for over 400 youth. And then finally, we'll have a cultural asset mapping report that will be available to anyone that's participated and the greater community, but sent directly to a link to folks who have participated in this, because we do want this to be a tool for people in our community to use. And we thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, you can always email me, heather@greenbicycleco.com. And I really appreciate everyone's continued participation in this process with us.
Thank you for bringing us all together.
Thank you. And if you have no other questions or comments, you can head out, and then our group is going to stay here and debrief and talk about next steps. But thank you again so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.